Welcome to the Career Catharsis Show. I'm your host, Neha Khurram. Each episode, I chat with experts in the fields of workplace wellness and career transformation to guide you in your professional journey. This week, I'll be chatting with my friend and mentor, Lisa Winberg, currently Director of Growth Strategies at Altis Recruitment. Be sure to check out the show notes for resources on hiring and job seeking. Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much for joining the Career Catharsis show. Really excited to talk to you about recruiting and job seeking in 2021. I know there's been a lot that's happened in the past year and a lot more to come. And it's going to be really important for us to lean on leaders such as yourself for insight on how to get through the next phase of job seeking and hiring. So before we get into it, I'd love for our audience to get a better understanding of your background. So if you could share a little bit about your career so far and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and hopefully share something that will be helpful for your listeners. So I've been in the talent acquisition space for well over a decade now in a number of different capacities. I studied human resources and business in my undergrad and thought I was going to be a professor of organizational behavior, did my master's and realized very quickly that wouldn't have been the right choice for me. Research was not my passion. I really do love working with people in a lot of different ways. So tell you a shorter version, but basically the way I got into the world of recruitment was actually through career coaching, through interview coaching actually. So I started what the kids today would call a side hustle, what I called at the time just tutoring, but I was helping people prepare for interviews. Fell into it really. I think it's a kind of common theme. I've listened to some of your other podcasts. I don't think a lot of people go into recruitment or talent acquisition knowing what they're getting into, and similar for me, I kind of just fell into it. My first official role in the talent acquisition space was at a large bank, working on their campus recruitment, which was a really interesting role. I loved being able to work with people early in their career and help set them up for success, and really was always passionate about learning and development. I also do have a few years of teaching experience. I taught high school business studies, so really liked that early career stage for people. Got the opportunity, loved kind of working with different hiring managers, learning what they were looking for, and also working with the students, doing a lot of stuff on campus, kind of helping them set their searches up for success as well. So I was at the bank for a few years and then fell into an opportunity to actually launch the Toronto office of a San Francisco-based startup focused on recruitment. And for me, what really drew me into that opportunity was that the mission of that company was to help everyone find a job that they love. And that really, I'm a very mission-driven person, and that was a really exciting and interesting opportunity. And the other piece that really drew me to that role was their founders were talking about the fact that recruitment as an industry was broken. And I felt that for sure. As someone in the recruitment industry, I always felt wrong having to pressure a candidate to take a role that I knew wasn't the best fit for them. And that was something that I really loved about this company that I ended up starting the Toronto office for. So worked there for almost 5 years, got to grow in a lot of different capacities, wore a lot of different hats, but it was always really, the candidate experience was always near and dear to my heart. And so everything I did in terms of my own growth in that company was all about how we could, make candidates' experiences better and also help the clients build amazing teams. So I was there. In my current role, I joined a company that is a proud Canadian company. They've been in business for over 30 years. And I joined in a new role that they kind of made up when I joined, which is all about growth and coming up with strategies to help kind of take the traditional staffing company into, 2021 and beyond. So it's been a really interesting journey, and I, have learned a ton, and I'm excited to share with you whatever I can.
Wonderful. Thank you. And for sure, there's been a pivotal moment, I think, even before the pandemic, where, as you said, recruiting, hiring is broken. And now shifting to your current position at Altis Recruitment, can you tell us what your experience is like working there?
Yeah, so I've learned a lot, and totally transparently, I only joined the company at the beginning of March. So I had about 2 weeks of kind of learning the ropes, and then the world changed overnight. I think we all can attest to that. And something that's really special, I think, about Altus is the fact that because we've been in business for so long, we have a very diverse group of clients. So the composition, the type of roles that the company has been working on have shifted a little bit, but because the client base is so large and so diverse, we've managed to pivot and really continue to support our clients and ensuring that we're delivering great talent to them to help them do what they need to do. And also we're still helping place a large volume of candidates. So the company, this is actually my first experience working with temporary staffing. So the company Altis does both temporary as well as permanent placements. So it's just been a really great learning experience for me to understand sort of nuances around staffing for different types of roles. I didn't mention this in my kind of overview, but prior to this, my main experience was in sort of financial services and then the world of technology, tech roles.
Mm-hmm.
So this is giving me exposure to all sorts of different industries and types of roles as well.
Mm-hmm. So interesting that you're joining a company, right when the pandemic hits. And then
Mm-hmm.
I think what we've seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that temporary staffing has kind of almost exploded since, a lot of companies are probably uncertain about their hiring needs. Can you tell us a little bit more about the nature of temporary staffing?
Yeah, I think it would be hard for me in a few sentences to kind of summarize because the nature of the work is such that it's different depending on kind of every company, every type of role. I will say we've seen a shift in terms of the types of temporary staff that are being hired. So, as you can imagine, a lot of companies had to quickly pivot and shift what they were doing and the kinds of roles they were hiring for. So, we saw a huge influx in demand, certainly for healthcare. Um, Kind of from all levels, entry level kind of screener positions. So
Mm.
people who are, stopping you before you go in, past the plexiglass, all the way up to, doctors and nurses, those kinds of roles. And an interesting one as well is around inbound customer service. We've seen a huge influx, especially for bilingual candidates. So any candidates out there who are listening to this who are bilingual, there's a ton of opportunity out there. We've seen a lot of demand as well in cybersecurity and technology, as you can imagine. I mean, we all, for the vast majority, I shouldn't say all, but a huge number of people are now working at home, have their workforces at home, working remotely that never thought it possible before COVID hit. I've had some really interesting conversations. So, like I mentioned, because I joined when I joined, I didn't really have a full portfolio of work to be doing. My focus is on growth. And,
Mhm.
come March 13th, the world shuts down. We're not thinking necessarily immediately about growth. We're thinking about survival, and we're thinking about how we can be resilient and get through the crisis and come out stronger. So, one of the things I actually kind of fell into was working on our companies, but also consulting with our clients on their return to work plans, their health and safety. So I've learned way more about health and safety than I've ever known before.
Wow.
But it's been interesting to have these conversations with pretty senior leaders at large companies throughout Canada and hearing, we did a ton of research before. So at Altis, something that we're really proud of is kind of being thought leaders in the HR space and trying to share with the community what we're learning. And no one, I think anyone who claims to be an expert in COVID is very cocky because I think that as soon as you think you're an expert, things change. But in preparing, we did a number of webinars. Myself and my CEO partnered together to do a number of webinars, and I interviewed a lot of our clients to kind of get their input, hear what they were thinking. It was really interesting, and I think I'm skipping ahead to one of the things you might ask me later, which is about things that are evolving and changing, and one of them is leadership's attitudes towards this remote work
Mm-hmm.
paradigm. And I would say, probably starting in like April and May, even having conversations with these senior leaders and hearing them say things like, I'll be the first to admit, prior to COVID, I didn't think it was possible to be productive, having my team dispersed, having people not in front of me, and quote unquote, like, I was wrong. These are quotes from, these really senior folks. And I think, I didn't mention this, but Neha and I, the way we know each other, we worked together in our previous organization.
Yes.
And I led a team there where I had team members all over the place. I had some team members who were located together in one city. We had other people who were on their own, sort of in small offices or small working from home throughout the United States. And so for me, it was less of a shift because it was like, it's a challenge, but you be mindful and you work on strategies to do it. And I think I'm actually really grateful for that experience. I know a lot of people say, sometimes working in a startup, 1 year you get 3 to 5 years of experience, and I certainly think that that's true. But you develop that resiliency and the adaptability piece. So I think that that's going to be, I hate the cliche of like the new normal, the new normal. No one knows what the new normal is, but I will say that having that flexible mindset in terms of where people are located is going to be really interesting. So I'll stop now and let you get back on track because I took us on a bit of a tangent.
No, absolutely. You're so right. I think there were some excellent points mentioned there. So I too struggle with when we call it the new normal, or even kind of just referring to the global pandemic as unprecedented, or, all the different cliches, but this is actually reality, right? So one of the questions that I had for you that I think, you've kind of touched on. So you mentioned resilience and adaptability, and really being conscious of what is now a remote workforce for many first-time remote managers and many first-time remote workers. So resilience, adaptability, being mindful of a distributed workforce. I think those three things definitely are key trends that are going to continue, not just during the global pandemic, but beyond. I think,
Absolutely.
A lot of these trends and habits are here to stay. Is there anything else that comes to mind when people are thinking of preparing in the recruiting industry and to get prepared for the great rehiring?
Absolutely. And I just want to make sure I add one note to what you just said. And I think that, the flexibility, the adaptability, the number one skill, or the number one thing that I think is going to be so important for anyone's success, whether they're a new manager or a seasoned manager or an employee, is around proactive communication. It's a lot harder to have accidental run-ins with people, to, run into someone in the kitchen and catch up on an impromptu, on a whim. So it's really about being proactive with your communication and being really intentional about it, making an effort to, whether it's whatever channel you're using, whether you're using Slack or Teams or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's really just about being intentional and making sure that you are proactively sharing and creating an environment where feedback is appreciated. So in terms of the question you actually asked me, the great rehiring, I think that it's really challenging depending on what your background is and what type of work you are most interested in and most passionate about. I think there's tons of material, tons of resources out there that will tell you that, tech is the future, and there's so many opportunities within technology and, different industries and things like that. I will say that it's really important, I think, to own your story and to know and really understand what your transferable skills are. Because I think that there's going to be, when we talk about the great rehiring, I think that in and of itself is also a very grand title to kind of talk about the fact that across the board, I don't truly believe in the highly skilled environment, if that's where we're talking about, there hasn't been as dramatic of an impact as we were all expecting, of course, and I'm not trying to minimize any losses in any other industries whatsoever, but when we talk about really skilled type roles, so, any roles in tech or highly skilled professionals like accounting and finance, marketing, HR, those, they have certainly slowed, but they've not kind of like disappeared. So I would say for people who are currently found themselves to be in a layoff or have, are looking for a new opportunity, I would say it's being really self-aware and recognizing what you do bring to the table. Really understanding when you're looking at job postings, um, looking at what they're asking for and trying to translate what you've done. Maybe you haven't had the exact same title that they're looking for, but when you actually look at the responsibilities, you can see that you've covered quite a bit. There's a lot of overlap between what you have done. So I think it's really, again, it's about self-awareness, and it's about learning how to tell your story in an effective way to help with that.
That's great advice. And I think something that you touched on is based on industry, there might not have been as much of an impact to certain industries, yet every organization has obviously had to reshift priorities, and
Absolutely.
layoffs and hiring freezes have definitely been an outcome of that. But what I'm hearing is even if you are, part of these high skilled opportunities, it's more of a reshuffle in the present rather than having to pause and wait for new opportunities to come up, such as in other sectors where, and again, there's obviously opportunities within travel and retail that are absolutely high skilled, but a lot of, what we would traditionally call odd jobs, a lot of students who are working part-time at the mall, or maybe that was their full-time, right? There's all ranges of people involved in that sector. But unfortunately, these are some of the hardest hit sectors that there's going to be a great amount of reskilling, but also upskilling required to kind of grab the opportunities that are available, but will also be kind of waiting for what happens in the next year or so.
And I would say that there is a ton of really great, some free, but also some low cost resources out there in terms of, I loved the term you used, reskilling or upskilling your experience. So to kind of piggyback to what you just said, going to that student who was working in retail at a clothing store, I think that person could really think about and reframe their experience to make them a great candidate for a customer service role, whether it's, at a call center, or more likely than not today would be, an at-home customer service role. So many of those skills that they've developed, being customer facing, helping people, whatever they're selling, helping assist somebody in a store. A lot of those skills, or I've seen a ton actually of really talented and dedicated people who have been in like the food and beverage industry. So a lot of restaurant type staff who love working with people who are, have been servers for a long time, be very successful going into these sort of customer success, customer service type positions. And again, it's the transferable skills there. You just have to think hard, but it's not hard. It's not hard once you think about it to kind of translate it. It's just about how you reframe how you're looking at things. So looking at, someone who's been a server in a restaurant has had to work under a lot of pressure. You're dealing with, hungry, sometimes rude, grumpy customers.
True.
Things are, you're dealing with lots of juggling competing priorities. You're not always in control. Something might happen, the kitchen might burn something, that's not your fault, and it's figuring out how to manage expectations and all of that. So to me, it's really about really owning what you bring to the table and figuring out a way to communicate that in a way that resonates with the recruiter on the other end who's looking to hire.
Absolutely. I think many of the skills are more or less on par with what a lot of organizations expect in customer service positions or sales positions even. And I think a lot of it has to do with the context and the vocabulary, which I think you mentioned there's some great resources out there that individuals can kind of just, I guess, get acquainted with and translate some of their experience to speak to their target audience that might be hiring right now. Yeah. So shifting a little bit from this conversation, I'd like to know on a personal/professional level, what keeps you motivated in your day-to-day?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, I think I'm very mission driven and very passionate about the industry that I am in. And even I've had very different roles throughout my career, sometimes working directly with candidates, sometimes, when I was working in the bank, as an in-house recruiter, hiring my own team has always been something that I've loved to do. And I think for me, I stay motivated when I can see the impact of what I'm doing. And I think, as I've become more senior in different roles, I'm less, a little bit more removed from the day to day of like coaching that candidate, helping them find that job. But what's really, I guess, motivating and exciting to me, I love building strong teams. I love seeing other people be successful. And that makes me feel really successful as well.
Mm.
And I think ultimately I'm just motivated, you know, in this industry, in staffing or in talent acquisition, we're helping people find meaningful work, and that's so important. And we're also helping companies find great people to build great companies. So I just think for me, I guess it's a very long-winded way of saying just knowing that I'm making a difference and really feeling like what I'm doing matters and is actually helping people.
Love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's something that a lot of talent leaders, recruiters, individuals in the HR space feel good about, is that
Hmm.
they're connecting great people to great companies to do great work. It's
Absolutely.
all the good feels.
Yeah.
So, how can recruitment in particular prepare for the new world of work that we're currently constructing? I know we've kind of talked a little bit about this, but
Mhm.
what really do you think what is it going to take for you to build a successful team for the type of business that we're now seeing evolve?
So I think it's a couple things. I think that one thing that the recruitment industry needs to really get on board with is recognizing that the game has changed. And what I mean by that is no longer are we bound by geography. Are we bound by time zones? Are we bound by, well, I can only really hire talent who's within, a 30-minute commute of my office. The world, in my opinion, has opened up significantly. And I
Mm,
think that the most successful companies are going to be the ones who are able to really capitalize on that and find ways and channels to engage with candidates that are not necessarily in their backyard. Now, I'm not suggesting that the office is going away. I actually don't think that that's true at all. I think I'm personally feeling this as well, but you know, I think that the future of work is going to be some sort of hybrid where people have the opportunity to still have that face to face if they want it. I think the
mhm.
days of, you must have your butt in a seat from X time to X time, this many days a week, and there's no flexibility. I think those days are gone. But I think that's a big piece is really recognizing that you have the ability to reach a lot further than you used to. And what goes hand in hand with that, I think, is recognizing how important it is to create a positive candidate experience. More than ever, candidates are doing their homework too. They're looking into your company, and they're being, I think, for the first time in a long time, like they're much more empowered than they used to be. And I think that
Mm.
that's a wonderful thing. I think, and both on both sides of the equation, I think it's really important that you treat people with respect. You treat people, you know, not necessarily. I've heard. I don't remember what the old saying, like the golden rule is treat others the way you'd like to be treated.
Mhm.
I think going a step further is treat others how they'd like to be treated, which I think is like really an interesting and powerful
Mhm.
thing. But from my perspective, no matter how competitive your company is, no matter if you're like the number one place to work, if you have a bad candidate experience, that's not going to last for very long. And I think that that's really important. Sorry, when I say that, like your rating as number one is not going to last for very long. So I think recruiters need to, whether it's investing in tools to help them do this or just making a very mindful process that talks about like closing gaps, following up with people, making sure that candidates are kept in the loop about the status of how things are going, and you're being as transparent as possible. I think that that's really really critical. And I think, I don't know, it's a mentality shift for a lot of people that even if you don't want to hire somebody, if you're a hiring manager or you're a recruiter, you still want that person to feel really good about the experience that they've had with your company, so that either A, they'll still want to be a customer if you're a business to, you're a B2C employer,
Mhm.
or they're going to want to refer friends to the organization and realize, I wasn't the best fit, but these people seem really amazing and I'd like to,
Mm-hmm.
I would send people their way. So that's on the company side. I think the companies really need to be more open-minded and recognize that I think they have to be more, it needs to be more of a two-way street than it has been in the past in terms of understanding what people want and offering a little bit more flexibility. Um, that's not to say, every person, every employee should, make their own schedule and do whatever they want. And, that's
Mm-hmm.
not at all what I'm saying, but it's more just recognizing that a one size fits all approach is not going to work in the future of the new world of work. And then on the candidate side, I think a huge tip again, and I already said this before, but is that self-awareness. It's really knowing what you want and what's important to you
Mm-hmm.
and taking control of your search and recognizing, I think, man, I've talked about this many times over the years, but like, making a list for yourself as a candidate. What are you actually looking for? And what's important to you? Because if you don't know that, you might just land at the first place that offers you a job and you'll find yourself unhappy very quickly. So it's really like taking stock, doing a very honest self-assessment and saying, these are my top motivators. And these are three things that I must have. These are a couple things that would be nice to have, and really assessing all opportunities against that criteria, I think is really important.
Absolutely. So what I'm hearing is both on the candidate side as well as on the company side, we need to make sure that people in general are bringing their soft skills to the table,
Absolutely.
right? So that self-awareness and something that you mentioned about treating others the way they want to be treated, right? So really having that empathy
Yeah.
and being able to anticipate how somebody is going to react and how you can adjust your messaging to connect with them and avoid misunderstandings. I think that's a really key piece when it comes to job searching as well as
Hmm.
recruiting
Yeah.
and so much of the work world in general. But to kind of go to
Yeah.
your earlier point when we were talking about distributed teams, remote work, and the need to proactively communicate. So now translating our soft skills to, a lot of text where some people I notice don't really like using emojis. And, some people when they type or they email, they might be pretty dry or formal. But then when you
Yep.
meet them, when you run into them in the office, they're smiling, they're jolly. And you know that, okay, that email that Susie sent me earlier in the morning, she wasn't mad at me. That's just the way she emails. But
Absolutely.
now because we have that lack of context, where we don't get to meet the person necessarily,
Hmm.
um, we might be reading into words a little too much, but we all
Yeah.
have to be conscious of that. And
Yeah. And
yeah.
and I think just going back to that that communication potential gap is, I think, a piece of advice, general advice for both sides of the coin. So for recruiters, is to kind of, recruiting is one of the highest volume and most challenging and sometimes stressful jobs out there. You're dealing with a lot of pressure. There's a lot of competing priorities, and I think sometimes it's easy rather to forget that the the stack of names or the numbers on your desk or on your desktop are people. And I
Mhm.
think I'm guilty of that too. When we were in in my current company, but also in the past, you'd be talking about having placement goals of 1,000 candidates or 1,000 placements, and when you stop to think about that, that's a
Mhm.
lot of people and a lot of lives that are being impacted. So I think for the recruiters, that piece of advice around that proactive communication is to actually stop and remember that
Mhm.
yes, you have to go through 200 resumes, and you know that 178 of those resumes are not going to be relevant for your
Mhm.
position. It's still That's still 178 people who've taken the effort to reach out and to make themselves vulnerable in some way. And we
Mhm.
don't owe every single person a phone call to say, thanks, but no thanks. But there needs to be something built in there to close the loop, to make people feel heard and acknowledged. And I think on
Mhm.
the candidate side, I've coached so many candidates in my career who've, driven themselves, gotten themselves super worked up over, I haven't heard back from this company. This must mean they don't like me. They must have gone with someone else. The stories that we tell ourselves, I would encourage candidates to try to take a step back and realize that although this job search for you is your number one priority, the company is probably working on a lot of different things. I mean, they are. It's not probably. Every company is working on a lot of different things. And, it's okay to follow up. If someone, either a hiring manager or a recruiter, has said to you, we should be able to have an answer to you by X date, and you don't hear anything, it's absolutely okay to follow up and to just give them, in a professional and courteous way, to just, re-express your interest, let them know that, you're definitely still interested in the position, and see if they need anything else from you. That reminder might be the nudge they needed to not push the meeting off until tomorrow or
Right.
Monday. So I think it's just, I guess, having empathy, like you said, and having an understanding of it can feel like a pretty, scary and opaque process, but my belief and my hope is that it's going to become more transparent on both sides. And that's always been, in different capacities, I've advised, hundreds of different companies on best practices around hiring, and that will always be something that I hammer home is, it's so important to share and to be transparent as possible, and to the candidates as well. So, if a company is your top choice and you're also interviewing somewhere else, let them know, like, hey, hey, company X, I wanted you to know I'm really excited about your opportunity, and I have a final interview tomorrow, or I have a final offer from another company. I don't want to miss out on you. Like, what's your timing? Being transparent, taking, like I said, again, getting in the driver's seat for your own career and advocating for yourself. That's my hope kind of for how to help fix this industry, is bring that transparency to the foreground, and hopefully help create more great matches for companies and candidates.
Love it.
Yeah.
So much great advice there. Definitely on both the recruiter side and the job seeker side. So both sides of the coin there, really great advice. I would love to know if you have any final thoughts for recruiters and job seekers before we wrap up.
Yeah, I think, again, the drum that I'm going to just beat is just around, candidate experience and being really thoughtful and empathetic in whatever it is that you do. I know that everyone's time is precious and limited, and it's hard sometimes to stay on top of everything. So I would encourage people to find the tools that they need to help themselves stay accountable. And always just remember, at the end of the day, that we're talking about people, and we can get a lot of great software to help us be better, but at the end of the day, on both sides, whether you're recruiter, hiring manager, or candidate, it's all about people. It's all about relationship management. And I would just say, no matter what the role is, come from a place, like, it's about being human, and it's about, coming from a place of good intent. And I would say assume a good intent in others, and then hold yourself to that standard.
Absolutely. Again, just reiterating that soft skills, right? So that need for great soft skills, relationship building, empathy, these are things that are not necessarily what you go to school for to learn. And, these are the qualities that I think many companies are looking for in the new world of work. So really great reminder there. Thank you so much, Lisa, and really appreciate all the work that you're doing at Altis currently as the Director of Growth Strategies. I'm sure a lot of listeners have learned from you. I know that I have, and always good catching up with you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to hearing future episodes.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode on hiring in 2021 with Lisa Winberg, Director of Growth Strategies at Altis Recruitment. For more information on hiring and job seeking, be sure to check out the show notes to access free webinars and additional resources. Hit subscribe to keep up with workplace wellness and career transformation stories with Career Catharsis.